You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 9th of April 2026 on Monocle Radio. Hello there and welcome to The Briefing, coming to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Emma Nelson, and coming up on today's programme, Iran thinks a truce in Lebanon was part of the ceasefire deal with the US. Israel and Washington disagree.
I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise.
We'll examine what the US Vice President argues is a mix-up and what others may claim is simply bad faith. And we'll look at how America's Democrats are navigating their way to some kind of view on the crisis as the Democratic National Convention kicks off. Plus the latest business headlines and its global countdown day. Where, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, are we travelling to?
We're going to a very exciting music market, Emma. It's Colombia.
Brilliant. That's all coming up right here on The Briefing with me, Emma Nelson. Now, that the US and Iran differ fundamentally over what is and is not part of the current truce between them has been put down by the Americans, at least, to a misunderstanding between the two parties. Tehran believed that any cessation of hostilities must include Lebanon, where Israel and the Iranian-backed militia Hezbollah have been engaged in fierce fighting. Israel disagreed, and yesterday it launched its deadliest strikes on Lebanon since it escalated its war against the Iran-backed group. Lebanon's civil defense agency says at least 254 people have died and more than 1,000 people have been injured in the strikes. We're going to be joining Inzamam Rashid, Monocle's Gulf correspondent. He'll be currently connecting on the line from Dubai. But while we do that, let's look at the day's other news headlines. Here's Hassan Anderson.
Thanks, Emma. Sudan is marking the third anniversary of the war that has ravaged the country, with over 150,000 people killed and more than 12 million displaced. A peaceful resolution seems far off, with little media coverage of the genocide and no negotiations in progress. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi arrives in North Korea today. Experts say the visit is a bid to coordinate positions between Beijing and Pyongyang ahead of Chinese President Xi's summit with Trump next month. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is urging the European Union to consider temporarily suspending its budget deficit rules if the conflict in Iran continues. The energy crisis ensuing from the war has hit Italy hard, leading the government to cut its GDP growth estimates for this year. And US corporate bankruptcies rose in March and are expected to remain high for the rest of the year, driven by higher interest rates, uncertainty over tariff policy, inflation and rising energy prices. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you very much indeed, Hassan. And you are The Briefing on Monocle Radio with me, Emma Nelson. We are intending to connect with Inzamam Rashid in a moment to find out what is happening in terms of the Iran-US ceasefire and the violence in Lebanon, which is causing an awful lot of trouble. But let us move to Let us move to America now, because and to New Orleans in particular, because America's Democrats are holding their national committee meeting there at the moment. And while the US president has taken upon it himself to launch a war against Iran without going through the correct procedures such as getting the approval of Congress, what chance does this leave the opposition to have their voice heard? Indeed, do they know themselves what they stand for when it comes to their relationship with the likes of Israel? Well, to talk us through all this, I'm joined now by Anita Riotta, who's producer of Monocle's Foreign Desk. Good morning. Good afternoon, Anita.
Good afternoon, Emma.
Israel's a big headache here for the Democrats, isn't it?
It definitely is. As you said, the Democratic National Committee's spring meeting starts in New Orleans today. This meeting is supposed to set the course that the party's hoping will deliver them wins in both the 2026 midterm elections and the 2028 presidential elections. Of course, with the war in Iran and the war in Gaza, Israel is a big divide in the Democratic Party. Members will vote on a series of resolutions at this meeting, including recognizing a Palestinian state, conditioning military aid to Israel, and trying to curb the influence of AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, as they are giving just huge amounts of financial support to Democrats that are more pro-Israel. Now, it's important to note that these resolutions are both unlikely to pass and are non-binding, even if they do. But it does highlight these sharp divisions, and it will be a bit of a temperature test, let's say, to see where the party is at. Politico is reporting that a DNC member said they'd received direct calls about these resolutions from not one, but two 2028 presidential hopefuls saying, we are going to have to answer for whatever the DNC position is if we run. So that just gives you a scale, even 2 years out for the presidential election, how large this issue looms.
Because there is a sense, isn't there? And ultimately, if the Democrats want to be re-elected, they need to have the voters behind them to do that. And how much is there a sense that American voters are shifting?
Massive, Emma, a massive sense. A Pew Research survey recently showed that 80% of Democrats and Democrat-leaning independents have unfavorable views of Israel. Now, this is up from 69% just last year and 53% in 2022. So you're talking about a nearly 30% swing in 4 years. That is seismic. This gets even starker if you talk about a Democratic primary, where, of course, anyone hoping to be president will have to win a Democratic primary first, where by a 44% margin, voters said they are less likely to support candidates that are receiving support from this AIPAC group.
So how much do we see the sense that the Democrats could try and fix these internal divisions, or is this just what they're here today to start? Because it's a hugely important voice. It's a hugely important division of voice within the party, isn't it?
Look, that's fundamental, right, is bringing this division either together or, if that's impossible, finding some coherent position that people can feel comfortable backing. I think it's important to remember that there is a lot of resentment or, anger left over from the 2024 presidential elections. It's clear that Kamala Harris's position on Israel and Gaza hurt her electorally. It's unclear if it cost her the election, but the DNC, after losing that election, elected a new leader and promised that they would do an autopsy of what went wrong and publish those results. They have chosen instead to not make those results public, which is, fueling a sense. It's not easy to then trust that Democratic leaders are being led by the views of their constituents and not the other way around.
Anisha Riotta, producer of Monocle's Foreign Desk, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. You're listening to The Briefing. Now let's join our Gulf correspondent on the line from Dubai, Inzamam Rashid. Good afternoon, Inzi.
Afternoon, Emma.
Good to have you with us. Now, we were just talking before your line went dropped about the difference between the US and the Iranians in terms of what is and what is not part of the current truce between them. And the Americans believe that there's a misunderstanding, saying that Lebanon and any kind of peace there was not actually part of the deal. The Iranians, however, believe that Lebanon was fundamental to it. So what has gone wrong here? Is this things getting lost in translation, or do we have just bad faith?
Look, J.D. Vance yesterday on the tarmac when he was leaving Budapest was suggesting that it was just a mistake, something that's just got lost in translation, as you mentioned. But look, it's difficult to understand where you've got Iran and Pakistan saying that, look, Lebanon was very much on the table. That was part of the conversations, that the fighting would also end there. But then you've got the US and Israel saying, well, no way, that wasn't part of it. In fact, Israel wasn't part of any direct conversations. We have to remember that. The US were talking on behalf of Israel as well. And from my sources in Pakistan, those that I've been speaking to who are actually involved in the negotiations, they're suggesting to me that Lebanon was discussed at length during these negotiations for this ceasefire framework. And any talk of stopping the fighting, any talk of military action pausing in the region, they believe, the Pakistanis in particular believe, that that's also included Lebanon. There is also a big question, and I've tried to get an answer to this, but I'm struggling to get an answer from anyone, any of my sources involved in this negotiation, is that was there actually any physical contract or something written down on a piece of paper that suggested this is exactly what a ceasefire is going to look like? And it feels like none of the sides actually have that. And it feels like maybe it was just all a verbal agreement that had taken place. It doesn't feel like any country is actually taking it upon themselves to write down an actual contract of what this ceasefire, an agreement of what this ceasefire actually is. So that maybe is also a concern. But clearly,
indeed,
this weekend...
Sorry, I do apologise to interrupt. The line is doing what the line wants to do. Just thinking about that, taking a step back, we are now talking about the idea of a conflict which has killed more than 1,000 people, has wreaked havoc across Iran, prompted chaos across the Middle East, damaged infrastructure, made the price of oil double, grounded planes, made tankers in the Straits of Hormuz park up for days, if not weeks on end. And we are actually actively contemplating the fact that no one wrote any of this stuff down or even recorded it on their phones.
I know you'd think that would probably be the case, but I'd imagine, and given the countries that were involved, Egypt, Turkey, a phone call at the last hour from China to Iran as well, and of course Iran and the US, maybe this has just been a ceasefire agreement that's been thrashed out on Instagram, on WhatsApp, on phone calls, and maybe on Telegram or whatever kind of private messaging apps there are. And it feels like there hasn't really been any formal piece of paper which suggests that this is what the agreement is. I'll try and find out some more on that. But what I did want to say, Emma, is that this weekend is more important than ever, because look, whilst we've got this fragile ceasefire agreement, which clearly I don't think lasted a whole day, given that Israel carried on targeting Lebanon, and actually it was a brutal day in Lebanon yesterday, so much so where more than 1,000 people were injured, with around 255 plus people killed as a result of Israeli attacks. And then of course we saw the Iranian response in the Gulf as well. They carried out their attacks yesterday here. Today, we believe that there have been no Iranian missiles or drones into the Gulf. But this weekend becomes more important because you've got J.D. Vance, the vice president, the whole US team, you've got potentially the Iranian team, and then you've got the Pakistanis all arriving in Islamabad to have these discussions. And you'd like to think that there's someone there at least writing down what's being said.
Let's move on to what happens next now, because clearly Israel has decided that it is going to press on with attacks against Hezbollah, and Hezbollah have retaliated in the last 24 hours as well. That this conflict is not going away anytime soon. What does this mean for America's position and indeed for Iran's position? Because Iran will now continue to do what Iran has been doing since the start of the war, which is causing chaos across the region and blocking the Straits of Hormuz.
Yeah, look, I think the US and Israel know that they have been winning this war when it comes to military might, when it comes to the fighting on the ground, they've been winning it. But Iran has always had the upper hand because they've taken this new approach by blocking the Strait of Hormuz, by having de facto control of that waterway. And that has had a huge impact around the world economically. And essentially, they have been in control of how this conflict goes moving forward, and that's why we've seen Donald Trump pushing for a deal to get this ceasefire and to have these peace talks. Look, I think the relationship between the US and Israel is going to be a precarious one over the next couple of weeks, in particular whilst this ceasefire is in place, because Israel wants to carry on its attacks inside of Iran, and it clearly is carrying on its attacks inside of Lebanon. And it feels actually, whilst they've paused the fighting inside Iran, they are putting more effort into targeting people inside of Lebanon. So I think that relationship is going to be a difficult one. And then, of course, how does the Gulf nations respond as well? Because if Iran does break the ceasefire and hits targets inside the Gulf when there is this supposed framework in place, can they stay silent any longer? The UAE's come out pretty fiercely, and they've suggested that there needs to be a bit more understanding about what this ceasefire is about. They said that the ministry emphasized the need for a comprehensive and sustained approach that addresses Iran's full range of threats, including nuclear capabilities, ballistic missiles, drones, military capabilities, and affiliated proxies and terrorist groups. And they basically said that they just want more clarity on a ceasefire, and essentially they want a seat at the table when it comes to negotiations.
Finally, Indy, if the Lebanese question can be sorted out and that some agreement is reached, which the Israelis agreed to and Hezbollah are on board with, is there a sense that the Iranians and the Americans can actually sit down together and sort this out? Or is there a sense that in 2 weeks' time, when we start looking at whatever is left of this ceasefire, that there will just be a resumption of hostilities?
It's a really difficult one, and I think that it circles back to why this weekend is so important. Because if the Iranians do attend, which I think they're thinking hard about, and I wouldn't be surprised if China picks up the phone once again and urges the Iranian delegation to travel to Pakistan to actually have these negotiation discussions, then Lebanon will be high on the agenda. It will be the first thing that they talk about when all these, and I think it's all men, all these men will be in the room together. It will be the first thing that they talk about, followed by the Strait of Hormuz, because whilst the attacks inside Lebanon are going on, Iran have basically said we will keep that waterway shut. But look, what does the future look like? I mean, I genuinely wish I had a crystal ball so I could find out, in fact, when I'm going to get some sleep, because right now it's very limited given how much there is going on in this region in particular. And I think this weekend, hopefully, we'll try and get some more answers on clarity, Emma.
Inzamam Rashid, Monocle's Gulf correspondent, thank you so much for joining us on the line from Dubai. You're with The Briefing. Let's pick up the business news now. Bloomberg's Ewan Potts is on the line. Good afternoon, Ewan.
Hello, Emma. Good to speak to you.
So yesterday we were looking at a drop in oil prices when a ceasefire was put into effect. What we have just heard in the last 10 minutes suggests that volatility is absolutely profoundly the key word for today. What has happened to oil prices?
Yeah, an almighty rally in global stock markets yesterday as investors welcomed the US-Iran ceasefire deal. A bit of FOMO going on as investors swooped in to buy some of the stocks which have been most beaten up during the past few weeks. Oil, as you mentioned, plunging 13%. That was the biggest one-day drop since April 2020, if you cast your mind back what was happening in the spring of that year. Now, today, with the Strait of Hormuz still largely blocked and Israeli attacks on Lebanon threatening to derail the fragile ceasefire, some of yesterday's moves just unwinding a little bit as investors perhaps realised that everything isn't quite sorted in the Middle East. And oil bouncing back a little bit as well today. Brent crude currently 4% higher, just shy of $100 a barrel. To put that in a bit of context, at its worst, we've seen oil spiking close to $120 over the past few weeks. So just a little bit off those peaks. Plenty of focus on that crucial stretch of water you've already been discussing on the show today. We understand that 2 fully laden Chinese oil tankers in the Persian Gulf are currently approaching the Strait of Hormuz. That would potentially put them on track to become the first such vessels to cross since the ceasefire was announced. That would be pretty significant if it actually comes to pass.
Okay, let's talk about certain areas of business which are being affected. I know if you're expecting a parcel from Asia, for example, things are getting quite slow. And so what areas are being what areas of interest which were a little bit different are being hit?
Yeah, fascinating. There's so many things perhaps you wouldn't think of at first blush, actually being affected by the disruption in the Middle East. We know that about a fifth of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas flowed through the Strait of Hormuz before the attacks started. It has been called the biggest ever disruption to the oil market, but there's some really quite surprising products also facing supply chain uncertainty. We've been speaking to the boss of an American maker of educational toys for children who is getting very worried about Christmas. Now, a large percentage of the world's toys are made in China, and the country's factories have been dealing with soaring prices for plastics derived, of course, from petrochemicals. Low-density polyethylene, a widely used plastic, for example, has seen prices spike as much as 55%. The boss of Dow, the biggest American petrochemical company, has warned last month that it could take as long as 9 months for the Persian Gulf petrochemical flows to return to normal, even once Hormuz does fully reopen. So for toy makers already dealing with higher US tariffs on goods from China, this is just another headache as they try to plan ahead for Christmas.
Ewan Potts at Bloomberg, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio. You're listening to The Briefing with me, Emma Nelson. It's Thursday, everybody, which means it's global countdown time. Everybody, Monocle's Fernando Augusto Pacheco is in the studio. We head to Donde?
Colombia. I love saying the word Colombia because, you know what? It's a very exciting music market as well.
It's not just an exciting word in itself.
No.
Frankly, Faye, you are one of the few people on earth who can make a word become an enormous moment. So may we just enjoy the way you say the name of this country again?
Colombia. I hope the Colombians enjoy the way I say it.
Something's just funny's happened to my insides. There we are. Okay, let's not think about that too much. Okay, tell us about the music of
Colombia. Well, maybe it's not going to be the last time I'm going to say the word Colombia, but you know, when I say exciting, it is exciting because all the Colombian artists, they go to other countries in Latin America. They're very popular. We know Shakira, we know Karol G, but there are newer ones as well. And I was very excited with this week's top 5. Shall we start at number 5, actually?
Yes, although I am quite interested in the amount of publicity that Shakira is getting in Spain at the moment. She's all over everywhere because she's taking over a big stadium in a few weeks. And it's literally everything that anybody is. It's everything.
And she'll be performing Copacabana in May as well. It's going to be the biggest concert. You know, after Madonna and Lady Gaga, this is Shakira's time as well.
Your hips can't lie, can they?
They can never lie. But number 5, perhaps our hips are not, well, we're not going to move our hips that much in this track.
No, I've heard it. I'm really not.
But I will explain to you the name of the band after. But let's have a listen to W Sound 08, Pico y Chal.
If I were a teenage boy, I would listen to that because that strikes me as music that's boy music. So this is really not working out well. This is kind of boy music in inverted commas that purports to be written for the ladies, but in fact is only listened to by boys in their bedrooms.
One thing I can tell you about the song is well produced. So basically, I will explain to you what W Sound is. It is actually the name of a collaborative project between a producer, Ovio, on the drums and another musician called West Cole. And it's 08 because basically they have one song at a time, of course, and they invite a different artist. So this time they invited Colombian trap artist Chris R. And it's the 8th song that they put there in the market.
8th?
8th. But
after 7 other goes and a collaboration, they got that.
We do like the 5th one because we play it on Monocle Radio, which is La Plena, and that will make your hips move a little bit.
Yes,
as well.
Not that one though.
What's
your thought on that one?
It's not really my favorite, but don't worry, there are plenty of music ahead. Well, let's go to number 4 because we're sticking with W Sound. And
Ovie on the drums.
And Ovio the drums, of course. And this time they invited Mike Towers. But don't get confused, because this one is W Sound 23. It's not their 23rd song, but they did an exception for Mike Towers. You know why?
I've no idea what you're talking about.
Well, let's have a listen to the song and I'll tell you why later.
Okay.
Metí a mi nalgona, a veces me desespero porque me pongo a pensar que ella está con quien me empezó a bailar y no la solté. Yo la hago arranquear, está en el top 10, no se puso el sostén. Mami, tú burlas cualquier retén.
Now that's what
I saw your hips moving out.
Everything went. The video to that is one of those videos where all the men are wearing lots of outdoor clothing, like big jackets and puffy things and hats, dressed as if they were going out in November in Tallinn.
They're in Bogota.
But the ladies have forgotten all their clothes. It's incredible, and they seem to be doing incredibly suggestive things with a California roll and a bit of Mackie, and there's lots of red curtains.
You are great at describing videos, I have to say. Better than me, Emma, in that case. But W Sound 23, because Mike Towers loves the number 23, because apparently that's the number of the jersey that Michael Jordan used to wear. So even when he releases songs, sometimes he always releases on the 23rd of March, 23rd of August. So some of his albums, they have 23 tracks. He's obsessed with that number, and that's why W Sound, they had to make an exception. They kind of disrupted a little bit the sequence of numbers there.
What a deep soul Mike must have. Right, let's move on.
Number 3, it is BTS, Swim. It's everywhere.
It's nonsense. I love it.
It's cool. Let's have a listen, and I'll tell you why they're so big in Latin America as well.
Yeah, swim,
begin. Swim, swim. I could spend a lifetime watching you swim, swim. This is how it all begins.
And of course, for the fans, they kickstart their tour tonight. I have to tell you, they are so huge in Latin America. They will be performing in Bogota and Colombia in October. And after, they're going to Lima, Santiago, they're going to Sao Paulo, they're going to Rio de Janeiro.
I love the fact that BTS are borderline a little bit naughty, but know if they do that, they'll lose their entire market. And so they have to be naughty enough that a 12-year-old girl is going to think, gosh, aren't you exciting? And everyone else just thinks, what? Because if you listen to their, one of the joys of life is reading a BTS lyric. And obviously, because I read words out loud for a living, I shall do it in the manner of a newsreader. Take it off the ground, I ain't never getting cold feet. Yeah, you know me, yeah. Sitting on the shore, now I'm ready for the whole sea. It's deliciously nonsensical.
I love non-explicit naughtiness, I have to say.
Non-explicit naughtiness?
Yes, I do like that.
Oh, Fernando, this is a whole programme. Can we do a global countdown of non-explicit naughtiness?
I'm in.
Have you got, I bet, have you got anything that comes to mind of non-explicit naughtiness?
In a weird way, number 2 is a little bit like that in a way. I mean, because it is the sunniest track in the top 5. It is by Ryan Castro and Capo Gangsta with La Villa. And there's a very different vibe because it's not about trap. This is about dancehall and Afrobeat.
And watermelons.
And watermelons, of course. And there's a very famous sample in this track, which I'll tell you after we listen to number 2.
Siente la vibra escuchando este dancehall, pero tenemos algo pendiente tú y yo después del show. Bye, bye, todos nos miran pero chao, bye, bye. Conmigo esta chimba, no woman, no cry. Aunque yo ya sé que es la que menos room fly. Bam, bam, biram, bam, bam.
A great usage of, the iconic song by Sister Nancy, Bam Bam from 1982.
Oh, yes, well. Amazing. We absolutely love Bam Bam by Sister Nancy. And we kind of like what La Villa have done with it as well. It's one of those things that when again, watch the video, everybody. This is the global countdown is only one slice of a deliciously silly cake. The fact that there are ladies wandering around in not very many clothes. They all seem to be phenomenally pretty and very happy eating watermelon. It's like a little bit of a sort of reference to a Harry Styles video, but without the, what was it, non-explicit naughtiness.
Exactly.
That we were going for. But the best bit is that the gentleman who is singing, or there are two, there's one in a cowboy hat, and then there's another gentleman, because they are obviously gentlemen.
Ryan and Capo. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Ryan and Capo. I don't know which one is on a jet ski in the swimming pool, and I just think, God bless that man for the effort that he made to look like that for everybody to see. I think he's wonderful. All the girls seem to really, really enjoy him. He's lovely.
We love La Villa here, so I think it's been approved. And you know what? I am going to take a risk. I think you will like our number 1 song. And this song is being the breakout hit of the year. She's known in Colombia. She's been performing for over 10 years. But it's one of those songs that suddenly it's everywhere. And it became number 1. And I think it's very fresh. I still think it's very sunny. And there's a little bit of a zouk influence there, which is very fast-paced, some synthesizers. So it's Aria Vega and Ryan Castro again, with Chévere.
We've just had Ryan Castro, haven't we?
We have a little bit more.
Is he the one
Ryan
in the pool, or is he the one with the hat?
I believe he's the one on the pool with the jet ski. So
yes,
you like it?
Lots of gold.
Let's have a listen.
Este bad boy, caballero con dinero y coleto como Totoy. Montado en el bote, en el mar hay un party, energía caliente en Kiami.
Ay, chévere, costeñita hasta que quedemos chévere. Ya estamos 3:15 y pasamos chévere. Ponte la pila o habla.
Oh, me gusta mucho. I love it.
Me gusta as well.
Chévere,
What are they talking about?
Chévere, it's interesting because if you type chévere, it means goat, but then chévere, it's cool.
It's cool.
It's literally cool.
They've done a song called It's Cool.
It's cool, and it is cool.
That's cool.
That's quite meta.
So cool. That's
meta.
very meta. To describe your own song before you've even done it.
I love it.
That's so deep. That's nearly as deep as Mike 23. He was important. Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Which is your favourite, by the way?
You know what? Number 2.
Yeah.
Because I can't stop dancing to it.
I can't stop dancing, full stop. It's a good job I'm on the radio. Fernando Augusto Pacheco, thank you so much for joining me for the Global Countdown. And that's all the time we have for today's edition of The Briefing. Many thanks to our producer, Angelica Jobson, and our researcher, Josefina Astrid Nagla Gomez, and our studio manager, Elliot Greenfield. The Briefing's back tomorrow at the same time. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you so much for listening.